I'm here with Jordan Kang and Asad Ali, and we're here today to talk to you about an issue that's become very important to us under the scope of this research, and that is autism in the workplace. But first we have to look at what is autism. So it's kind of hard to define, but essentially it's a developmental disorder that's often characterized by behavioral, social, and communication challenges. Now autism is a spectrum, so that means that symptoms can vary greatly from person to person. But more than definitions and symptoms, autism is about people. This is Jeremy. Jeremy was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome at 17. Despite being incredibly intelligent, friendly, and hardworking, he's been unable to maintain a long-term job. Statistically, if things don't change, he likely never will. This is because just 13.8% of adults with autism hold full-time employment.
But Jeremy isn't the only one affected. 1 in 66 Canadians are diagnosed with autism. That's nearly 600,000 people just in Canada, and roughly the population of the city of Vancouver. For those individuals, unemployment, or at the very least, underemployment is almost inevitable. That means that thousands of others like Jeremy will never get the sense of where that comes from productive labor or the satisfaction that comes from financial independence. Instead, what they will feel is lower life fulfillment and social isolation.
There's also an economic cost. The lifetime cost for supporting an individual with autism ranges from 1.2 to 4.7 million, depending on severity. And conservatively, this amounts to an annual cost of 9 billion due to support costs and loss in productivity.
So why is this still a problem? We've uncovered 5 factors that keep the status quo in place. The first is what is referred to as the service cliff. The overwhelming majority of autism support initiatives are directed towards children, so when a person reaches working age, there is a significant decline in those services.
The next factor relates to how employers reach out to the applicants and the application itself. People with autism often interpret things very literally. If they see a job posting where they fulfill 9 out of 10 requirements, they will often view the one they are missing as disqualifying and won't even apply. This discourages them and they abandon traditional recruitment channels, therefore making it even harder for employers to reach them.
We also see that the interview process is a problem because people on the autism spectrum often struggle to understand the social nuance required during that process. During every professional and personal interview that we did, this was singled out as the most obvious barrier to workplace.
Lack of workplace accommodation is the final barrier these people struggle. Workplaces are often designed in a way that unintentionally discriminate against adults with ASD, with things like overstimulation, social nuances, and lack of clear instruction being common issues.
And leading to many of these contributing factors is the lack of understanding surrounding autism and the stigma still associated with it. We spoke to an individual with autism, and he asked to be referred to as T. And what T said resonated with us. Companies want you to self-disclose so they know who not to call back.
So we can see that the current system isn't really working, but things are starting to change. And the neurodiversity movement has been spearheading this change. This movement proposes that autism and similar neurodiverse conditions should not be seen as disabilities, but just as differences. People with autism are often uniquely capable in things like their focus, their attention to detail, and their divergent thinking. Now the movement says that in a business environment, these are incredibly useful traits, and hiring these people should not be seen as charity, but as a competitive advantage.
Our research uncovered solution efforts that target these 5 factors. This can be seen from 2 different perspectives: workplace efforts that hire and accommodate for people with autism, and individual efforts that help them specifically. Workplace efforts focus on making the workplace more accommodative by changing the workplace practices for adults with autism. Special Stern, an international nonprofit that has been spearheading the neurodiversity movement, has worked with companies like SAP, Microsoft, and CIBC to launch pilot programs and hire adults with ASD. 16 companies currently participate in the Autism at Work Roundtable to share best practices, create existing ideas to identify talent, and generate meaningful employment opportunities for adults with ASD. Presently, the Roundtable has created a playbook that serves as a standard as to how businesses can accommodate for people in the workforce.
Now, universities also play a major role on the individual level. They provide guidance and other supports that helps transition students to the workplace. Now, other nonprofits such as Lime Connect also play a role by connecting individuals with autism to potential employers and appropriate jobs. But these current efforts are offered for a wide variety of disabilities, and therefore they lack the expertise to deal with and to accommodate for a complex issue and topics such as autism. Now, the federally funded organization, Ready, Willing, and Able, also assists in this solution effort, as it provides and creates awareness and educates employers on the unique skill set and value and spreading that neurodiversity movement to employers. Now, we see both individual and workplace efforts. They are good, but they're not sufficient. Employers and professionals that we spoke to all agree that there needs to be a collaborative effort between businesses, governments, and nonprofits on both sides of the solution before systemic change can be made.
For additional information, we look at tangential areas in different geographies and sectors. In the 1970s, the Toronto Symphony Orchestra held auditions by putting up a curtain in front in order to decrease gender bias. This simple change increased the likelihood of women advancing to the next stage by almost 50%, showing how alternative hiring methods can be effective. In 2009, the UK legislated the Autism Act, which required governments to create a strategy that specifically focused on the needs of adult ASD. Though this didn't increase employment that much, it significantly improved diagnoses and guidance support, showing how legislation can improve the lives of adult ASD.
Now, to focus and address and identify some of the areas of progress for positive change, we identified 3 major gaps in current solution efforts, as well as 3 levers stakeholders can pull to address those gaps.
So the first gap is cream skimming. So a lot of employers have made efforts to hire people with autism, but there's been concern raised that they're only focusing on the highest functioning people of the spectrum. And this gap really stems from a lack of information. There's just not very much research available investigating the workplace needs and abilities of people on the lower ends of the spectrum. Now, a lever here would be to promote education and research so we can find meaningful employment for people on lower ends of the spectrum in ways that highlights their unique abilities.
Legal standards exist for people with other disabilities, such as special screens and software for people with visual impairments, and wheelchair access for people with physical disabilities. Guidelines like the Playbook are available, but they're not created by enforced by a legal standard. The simple lever here is to simply create the standards. However, this needs to be done in a collaborative effort between the government, the businesses, as well as the nonprofits, and it needs to be targeted both towards the workplaces and individual support, ideally backed through legislation.
Now, the final gap that we addressed and looked at was the underlying stigma still associated with autism. The current efforts that we saw don't directly address the stigma, and the neurodiversity movement is a good start, but there needs to be more. We need to shift our mindset towards autism acceptance and away, and not just simply focus on autism awareness. Now, a simple lever here would be for education. Just look at how anti-smoking campaigns have shifted the social norm of smoking to now being an unhealthy habit. Now, historically, it also taught us that in order to truly fundamentally change that embedded mindset, there needs to be a nudge. And it so becomes because in 2009, it was only because of the ban of public areas did smoking truly become socially unacceptable.
So through our research and in talking to people like Jeremy, we came to understand the scope of this issue, how hundreds of thousands of Canadians are so profoundly affected and how little is being done to address it. The more we learned about the issue, the more we learned that we actually didn't know that much. But if we want to continue learning, we want to look at what more people with ASD have to say about it, what the political environment looks like with regards to autism, and what medical professionals think about the issue. Now, we actually don't have a personal connection to the issue. We really just chose this topic because we were interested. But after speaking to people like Jeremy, we started to realize that many of the same biases that perpetuate this stigma were present in our own minds. So we've been trying to address those biases, trying to remove that charity mindset, the idea that we need to just help these people, that they need our help. And we were trying to move forward towards the idea that as a collaborative effort, we can co-create solutions between all stakeholders and really make systemic change. Thank you.